Welcome to the Unlocked podcast, hosted by me, Julia Myron.
Hi, guys. Welcome again to another episode. And today on the show, we're unlocking the psychology behind imposter syndrome with an esteemed guest, Jill Stoddard. Dr. Jill Stoddard is a licensed psychologist, author, TEDx speaker, health coach, and award winning teacher who is passionate about sharing science backed psychological insight to help people thrive. She's the founder and CEO of Flexible Communications LLC in Massachusetts and the founder and director of the Center for Stress and Anxiety Management in California. Dr. Stoddard is also the co-host of the popular podcast Psychologist Off the Clock. She's the author of 3 books, one of which is Imposter No More, the subject of our conversation today. And her books have been translated into 10 languages. Her writing has appeared in The Washington Post, The Good Men Project, and Mindful Return. She is frequently featured as an expert in the media, including the New York Times. I am truly looking forward to this conversation today. But before we begin, I would like you guys to do me a favor and please subscribe to this channel for the opportunity to have more guests on this podcast and guests of amazing caliber that we can have great conversations with. So please do me a favor before you listen to the episode, do like, share, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into our conversation. Welcome, Jill. How are you?
I am great, Julia. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for coming. Would you prefer Dr. Jill or just Jill?
Oh, no, please call me Jill. That's fine. But Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
I already did your intro and I read your book, Imposter No More, and I have a lot of questions. I do not think 45 minutes or an hour will be enough, but we will try to get through all my questions from reading your book. So the first thing when I opened your book, the first thing I saw is you might be a fraud. That's the first line I read because I like to look at the content and I was like, oh my goodness. What made you start with that gut punch with your book?
Well, because I think anybody who is picking up this book believes that they're a fraud.
Yeah.
Right? Why else would you read it? It's that like, that imposter quote unquote syndrome. And we can talk about it not being a syndrome if you want, but it's that whole idea. It's beyond, it's not just an inner critic who says you're less than, that's part of it. But it's this inner critic who says you're less than, and this fear that any minute everybody's going to find out and figure it out. And that's really what makes that imposter phenomenon different from, just the mean things that we tend to say to ourselves. It's that fear of being revealed.
You touched on it a little bit, but you spoke about imposter syndrome not being a syndrome. So can you please just offer us a definition or an insight into what imposter syndrome actually is and what ways can it show up in our day-to-day lives?
Sure. I mean, I think this is so critically important. So when this phenomenon was first identified back in the late 70s by 2 female psychologists, doctors Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, it was actually called the imposter phenomenon. And at that time, they believed that it only affected high-achieving women. Now, of course, we now know that that's not the case, but at that time, they thought it only affected high-achieving women. And so isn't it interesting, this was the late 70s, that you've got all of these high-achieving, so like badass women that are out, going to go make a difference in the world that have this fear of being exposed as being less than. And just like that, our culture rebranded it a syndrome. What's a syndrome? It's a disorder. It's a disease. It's a pathology. And so there is sexism baked right in to this misnomer, imposter syndrome, right? It's like, oh, you poor little ladies, you must be diseased or have a pathology if you have some self-doubt, even though you also have a history of being told covertly and overtly that you don't belong at all the tables. So of course you question whether you belong at those tables. Oh, but it still must be a disease, a disorder, a pathology. So that's one reason. The other reason is the prevalence rates of this phenomenon vary pretty widely in the research, but for the majority of studies find that it's about like 40 to 70% of people. It ranges from like 9% to 86%. But the bottom line is like most of us are going to experience these thoughts and feelings at some point. And what else exists in the world that affects half the population that is a disorder, a disease, or a pathology? Nothing. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
That's just normal.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason I think it's normal is I think that this is actually, I think it was evolutionarily programmed into us. Because if you think about early humans, like cave people, early humans who hunted and gathered and traveled together had a survival advantage. We didn't have claws and fangs and run at high speeds. We had each other. Right. So if you got kicked out of your group, you were dead. And so doesn't it make sense that you would develop this kind of inner monologue that says, do I add value? Do I measure up? Are they going to figure out that I'm not carrying my weight, that I can't carry as many heavy fire logs as that other person? And if that's revealed, I'm at risk of getting kicked out and I'm at risk of being dead. And so the fittest who survived were those that were checking their status. Think about how often we engage in social comparison. And of course, technology and social media has like amped that up to steroid level. But I think these things are actually programmed into us. So there's sexism baked into this word syndrome. It makes no sense because the majority of us will experience it at some point. And we were literally evolutionarily designed to worry about these things. And so for all of those reasons, it just simply cannot be a syndrome. So I always like to put a bid out for people to kind of join me in a cultural rebranding, or really just taking back the old name, calling it imposter phenomenon or the imposter experience, imposter thoughts and feelings, or I just shorten it to imposterism and get away from this word syndrome.
Yeah. As you were talking, it was reminding me of my own experiences with this phenomenon. It's almost, when I heard the term imposter syndrome, it definitely invokes something clinical, mental, instead of experiential. So you outlining that for me and helping me figure out and connect the dots, it's like, oh, it's not. It's a very normal part of the human experience. And just because you experience it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. A lot of people, like you said, the data is staggering, are experiencing this same feeling, which then brings me to my next question is, how do we then tackle that? What are some, in your book, you offer up some practical ways. So now that we know that it's a natural part of the human experience, how do we go about engaging with that? And I know you named your imposter voice, if you want to talk about that too. Sheila.
Yes, her name is Sheila.
Hope Sheila's not bothering you so much. So how do we handle our Sheilas?
Well, so that's one way is to. Oh, what just happened?
No, you're still, no, it's fine. Continue.
Oh, okay. Can you still? I can't see you anymore. I can only see myself. Is that okay?
But I can see you.
Okay. So one way, essentially what we want to do is get a little bit of distance from this inner voice. And one way to do that is to name that inner voice. And so mine is Sheila. I don't know why, like, no offense to any listeners named Sheila. I've never known a Sheila. I don't dislike any Sheilas. I think I was even listening to that song, Oh Sheila, and that's where it came from. And so basically what that means is when that voice gets loud for me, I recognize that, just like I was just talking about evolution, we have these thoughts for a reason. And if you think about all of, that mean inner critic that we all have, that mean imposter voice, think about what that voice is trying to help you with or protect you from. Typically, it's trying to protect you from failure, from humiliation, from rejection. Now, it does a poor job. And I always think of it as like, a car alarm that goes off when the wind blows. Like it's oversensitive and we don't need it to be working overtime the way that it does. But essentially, that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to protect us. And so what I'll say is, okay, Sheila, I hear you. So let's say, for example, Sheila popped up and was like, who do you think you are to be on a podcast with Julia Myron? You don't have anything interesting to say. Nobody's going to care. I would say, I hear you, Sheila. I get that you're just trying to protect me from messing it all up, but I got this. And what that does, it doesn't make the voice go away. That is not the goal. but it creates a little bit of space. So instead of being like, well, people who are listening and not watching can't see me, but I'm folding my hands together to create this idea of like fusion, or like we get hooked by these thoughts. We treat these thoughts like they're truths with a capital T. And what we can do when we name that inner critic is get some space so that in that space, we can make a decision that isn't being dictated by our thoughts and feelings, but really it's based on our personal values. And values are just who you want to be, what you want to stand for, what you want your life to look like, what truly matters to you. Or what I like to say is just the me I want to be, because it's memorable to think about it that way. And so for me to say, okay, Sheila, I got this, I can then go, you know what? My professional mission is to share this science-backed information with as many people as I possibly can, and especially with people who may not have the resources to, go to psychotherapy, because I'm also a therapist with an anxiety clinic and a coach. And so not everybody has the resources for therapy and coaching, but books are inexpensive and podcasts are free. And these are ways that I want to get this message out there. So even though I have that loud voice saying, who do you think you are? My values say, I want to show up in this way. And so that's what I'm going to choose to do, even though that might mean having to do it in the presence of anxiety or self-doubt. So this question you have of like, so what do we do? I think what sets I know what sets Imposter No More apart from other books out there on this topic are, if you go do a Google search and you look for like, how do I combat imposter syndrome? It's all going to be like 5 ways to build your confidence and increase your self-esteem. But I don't know about you, Julia, and listeners, but like I've tried that every which way from Sunday and haven't been able to do it. And I'm a psychologist. Like I have the skills and I still can't do it. And so what's different about Imposter No More and, the talks I give, everything I do is based around cultivating psychological flexibility. And that's essentially learning to make conscious, deliberate choices to live your life in line with your values, even if that means doing so when you feel insecure or anxious or scared or uncertain, even when that inner critic gets loud, because often the more we fight not to have those thoughts and feelings, like I could tell everyone right now, try as hard as you can to not think of a red balloon. And now we're all thinking of red balloons. Of course.
Yeah.
And try for the rest of the day. Like, I could focus on my water bottle and go water bottle, water bottle, water bottle. So I don't think about a red balloon. But guess what's going to happen in about 30 seconds? The red balloon's going to start floating up behind my water bottle. And I'm going to get that 99 Red Balloons song in my head and start picturing Pennywise. And all of a sudden, I wasn't thinking about red balloons anymore. And now the harder I try not to, the more they're present. And so what psychological flexibility does is it allows you to change your relationship to your thoughts and feelings so they're no longer in charge. And to do the thing that you want to do, even when it's hard.
Scared.
Even you have to do it scared. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You remind me, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the Inside Out cartoon. And in the latest episode, anxiety came in, and you can see anxiety. She's trying to protect her and make sure she's okay. And when I think of my inner Inside Out, it's exactly like that. Just frazzled hair, trying to scour and say, oh, let's make sure Juliet's okay. But that is literally how it feels inside my head. And I haven't named mine yet because I don't want to personalize this. I just want her to go away. But that is a good tool, because how imposter syndrome has come up in my one is no matter how much I get, it's still there. So I have the experiences, and it almost makes you undermine your experiences. So did I really get that law degree? Is that really my name on that law degree? Oh my goodness. Did I really, I know this is my work experience. I worked at this amazing place, but did I do a good job? Am I worthy to put this on my resume? It's just, even though it's factual, you have it and it's there, it's still always constantly undermining your experience. And I love that in your book, you said that it's not about curing, which you also touch on a little bit. It's about outsmarting it. So I just putting it together, you can outsmart it with your values. Like no matter what, I had imposter syndrome in emailing you to come on this podcast. And it's like, I want to, what, going back to what is the point of my podcast, is to have people like you
Yes.
engage with people who may never have somebody like you speaking to them and helping them navigate the world and making the world a better place. So outsmarting it with your values is an amazing way to think about it. And I
I
thank you
love
for
that. And I think the other thing I want to say there is like we've been sold this weird bill of goods that like being successful means you quote unquote should be able to do things with all this confidence and self-esteem. But think about it this way. Like if you think about the last time you were laying awake at 2 o'clock in the morning and like the wheels are spinning and you can't fall back to sleep, think about what it was you were worrying about. When I do talks and stuff, I always joke with my audience, like it probably wasn't that Game of Thrones isn't coming back for another season, even if it was your favorite show of all time. You were probably worrying about your family, being competent at work, the state of the world, your health. It's the things you care about. Right. And so, like, we have this idea that if something is scary or painful, it's a sign that something's wrong, that we're supposed to run away. And all of my work centers on this idea that that's completely false. That if you're doing something that you care about doing well, and it's something that's challenging, of course you're going to have some worry or anxiety or self doubt and not be full of confidence. Like, it's sort of crazy to think it should be any other way, because if we don't care about it, then we don't worry about it. And so really a lot of times those uncomfortable feelings that, you're right, none of us want them. We would love for it all just to go away, but this is how we're built. And often they're actually a sign that like you're exactly where you're meant to be. Like they're pointing out what matters to you. And like going back to your podcast example, having, feeling like an imposter reaching out to me. I have a podcast too, and I feel the same way all the time. And what you learn by doing it is like the thing, when you face your fear, when you do the thing that's hard in the presence of that fear or self-doubt, you learn that that bad thing my mind is telling me is going to happen. So in this case, Jill will reject me and be like, who do you think you are? I would never come on your podcast. You're small potatoes for me, whatever, right? You'll find out that that almost never happens. But that even if it does, right? Let's say I said, oh, thank you so much for inviting me, but I'm so busy. I just don't have the time right now, maybe some other time, right? Like, even if I said no, it wouldn't be that big a deal and you could handle it, right? And so the more we face our fear and we see that our prediction doesn't match our outcome, that's how new learning takes place. And we go, oh, this thing that I was so scared of actually isn't so dangerous, so I can keep doing scary things. And then they tend to become a little bit less scary over time.
Yeah. Have you heard about this phenomenon where people are doing on social media? It's called failure therapy or rejection therapy. So you go on, so a person may go talk to a stranger and knowing the stranger will reject them and keep doing things they know they'll get rejected. So they'll get used to getting rejected, right?
Yes, that has been around for a very long time and is very, very, very effective. Yeah. It's awesome. I used to have, when I worked at an anxiety clinic in Boston and I had some clients who had social phobia, I had one guy who was like very buttoned up, and I had him button his shirt wrong, so the buttons were off, roll up one of his pant legs, mess up his hair, and go walk around this area called Kenmore Square and ask people for directions to Kenmore Square. And he literally thought someone was going to call 911 and he would be put in like an inpatient psych unit. And of course that didn't happen. Nobody cared. And like one lady said, oh, honey, you're already in Kenmore Square. Can I help you find something specific? Like, people were so nice to him.
Yeah.
It's that thing you think is going to happen almost never does. Or if something undesirable happens, it's not as bad as your mind is telling you it's going to be, and you can handle it.
It breaks my heart when I see people who have so much to offer the world, even in like the profession, but because of rejection or because of that voice in their head, you're not able to go all the way, but they're a star. You know that they have it in them they're not only smart, they have everything they need to. And most of the times, the people I've engaged with that have these things, they've already even accomplished so much, but they're just not able to really outsmart that voice in their head. And I was listening to, the great Michelle Obama speak, and she was like becoming the first lady, the first Black first lady. She would walk into rooms and be like, oh my God, why am I here? Until she figured out, wait, everybody is like some form of something's going on. Nobody has it all together. And she said that I've been to the highest of the mountaintops, the UN places, and I've been to the grassroots places, and it's all the same. And that's why I feel like it's so important to have people like you, people like her, come out and say, listen, it's like what you're experiencing, it's normal. Do not let it stop you from pushing and getting the greatness that the world needs, especially right now, out into the world. So
that's it. And I think the mistake people make is thinking, or maybe like the advice people give, which is well-meaning, is like, you just need to believe in yourself. And so then when they don't, and the reason we say that is because like, I know you're amazing and I believe in you. So you just need to believe in yourself. But that advice is actually, it's like a miss sort of, because then the person's like, well, I don't believe in myself. So I guess that means I can't move forward. And I talk about this thing in the book that I called the gap trap. And essentially it's that we stay trapped in stagnation due to a perceived gap in knowledge or expertise or feeling ready or confidence. And we think we have to fill the gap before we move forward, which of course is a trap. And really the key is moving forward, even in the presence of some self-doubt and some anxiety. And I have like a favorite metaphor. Can I share that?
Of course.
Okay. So this is one that I made up that I think is in Imposter No More. I have a couple other books, so I always forget what's where. But the idea here is you are a ship and you are journeying on the sea. You're on a grand adventure. Maybe you've got some goals. Maybe you're going to stop in some ports, but you're on this journey. And all of a sudden, a very thick fog rolls in. And the fog is so thick, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. And of course, this fog is your self-doubt, your imposter thoughts and feelings, your anxiety. And you think, well, this is dangerous. My only option here is I got to drop anchor and I have to wait for that fog to clear before I continue journeying. But what if the fog never clears? Because has it? Like mine hasn't. It might get more or less thick, but it's kind of always there. And so as long as we're sitting waiting for that fog to clear, we're no longer journeying or adventuring. But there is a way forward even when the fog is thick, and that's the lighthouse. And if you look at that beacon, that light can guide your way, and you might have to go a little slower. It might not be clear and easy. But if you have those values to light your way, you can continue to move forward even when that fog is thick. And I think that is the journey that we all need to start taking it. And one of the ways I help people to do that, because of course that's easier said than done, is through lots and lots and lots of practices, which there are many in the book, for getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If you can do that, it opens so many possibilities for you.
Yeah. Sometimes when I remember I was invited to the United Nations like 2023, and I had to speak on the microphone and intervene and say something. And when I tell you my voice was shaking and I was like, that lighthouse, I was just looking at the clock like, and everyone's quiet, listening to you. You're like, oh my, you're shaking, but it's like, you finish it, push through it. They'll go hear your shaky voice, and that's fine. Like, and also just know, like, okay, this was uncomfortable for me, but the next time I will do it again. I'll be stronger. I'll be better. You do get better, and sometimes you fall, but again, you just have to. You see the fog, like, okay, am I making sense right now? Sometimes when I'm speaking, I'm like, I know I'm rambling, and you're like, okay, land that ship.
Well, next time you have an opportunity to do that, I encourage you to record it, video record it, because you'll watch it and go, oh, and I do this in session. You'll watch it and go, oh, I didn't look nearly as anxious as I felt. I actually sounded quite coherent. When we feel anxious, we misinterpret, that's not quite the right word, but like our evaluation of how we appear to others is not accurate because we're basing it on how we feel, which isn't how we actually look.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love that. And also you talk about in your book about imposter by design. I love this.
Mm,
I love this chapter where it talks about how some of us have been socially programmed to feel how we feel. So it's not just
yeah.
coming out of nowhere. And you also speak about your own experience with being called its particular name and how that has influenced you growing up.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that and
Yeah.
expand what that means?
Sure. Yeah, when I was growing up as a little girl, my parents, my mom especially, would call me Tubby, little Tubbette, Tubby, Tubby 2x4 who couldn't fit through the kitchen door. And so, of course, no surprise, I grew up with a lot of food and body image issues and just felt, deeply inadequate and unlovable. And I fought very hard to not feel that way. So I would, be an epic people pleaser and an overachiever. And that would sort of make me feel better, like in the moment. But then it really made me feel like it didn't really work in the long term because it made me feel like I was only like lovable and worthy if I was people pleasing and overachieving. So it like kind of backfired, if that made sense. And it contributed to this feeling that like any minute, if people see the real me, they're going to see how flawed and inadequate I really am. And so there's that imposter experience. And so, like I was talking about before, I really do think a huge portion of this is baked into us through evolution because it was adaptive back in the day. Um, but I think our learning experiences in our families of origin can make a difference, like the example I just gave. I even had a client whose parents were wonderful. They were very close and they were very kind and supportive, but they were like too supportive and they did so much for her that she developed this belief that she couldn't like solve her own problems or make her own decisions. And then that made her feel like any minute people were going to kind of figure out that she didn't really know what she was doing. So, it's like when you like a kid goes down the slide and you clap, or every kid gets a trophy. It's like kids are smart. They know that they haven't actually done anything amazing to earn all of that praise. And so that can kind of create some of this I'm not really as good as people think I am. Like they're giving me
Mhm,
credit where it's not deserved. And so
mhm,
any of these kinds of things can lead to, can contribute to the vulnerability of these thoughts and feelings. But like, because so many of us have it really does seem to just be part of our makeup. And I think the other thing that's important to note that may be a contributor, this is an empirical question that, as far as I know, has yet to be answered in the research. But they've done a lot of comparisons of just looking at the difference between, cis men and cis women. And does one have more of these experiences than the other? Some studies find that women have it more frequently. Some show that it's the same. Only one study I know of found that it was higher in men. But I don't think that comparing the two cisgenders is what we should be comparing. I think what we should be comparing is people who have any history of marginalization or being othered with people who
mhm,
don't. Right.
mhm.
So if you are a woman, if you are trans, if you are gay, if you are a person of color, if you're an immigrant, if you have a disability, then you have had an experience of being told you don't belong at all the tables. And so, of
Mhm.
course, doesn't it make sense that you then question if you belong at all the tables? And I tell a story about my dad, who's a cis, straight, white, he's in all the privileged categories and has literally never had one single experience of marginalization in his entire life. And when I told him I was writing this book about the imposter syndrome, he was like, "What? What's that?" And I
Mhm.
thought once I gave him the definition, he would recognize it. He just didn't know what it was called. Nope.
Yeah,
Utterly baffled, like
clueless. Yeah.
could not wrap his head around the existence of this thing. And I had the same
Mhm.
conversation with a doctor of mine who was in all of those same groups and was like, "What? I have no idea what you're talking about." Like they have never been told they don't belong at a table, so they don't question whether
Yeah,
they belong at the tables, right?
yeah, yeah.
So
And
that's
that,
another reason it's not a syndrome. It's a result of social oppression.
yes, yes.
Right.
Absolutely get it now because I think of a lot of work has been into myself, into maintaining my confidence. I say maintaining because I believe every child is born confident. Everybody, you come into this
Mhm.
world with the tools and everything you need to succeed. But what happens is society and circumstances beat it out of you. So I say maintaining and getting it back because I don't think that I did not have it to begin with. I think we all have it inherently in us when we're born. It's just life that beats it out of us. Some of us with a bazooka, some of us with a long cane. It just depends. But
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work, and I've spoken to a lot of people from privileged backgrounds, and maybe they were born wealthy, and they say, well, if I fail, I fail. And I'm just going to walk into this room like I belong there. They never question, do I belong here? Do I belong here? That's not So I started to teach myself that. And I started to say, you will walk in here like you belong here. Because
Yeah.
that person like, I know comparison is not good, but this is sometimes where comparison that's right from me. I'm like, that person is exactly the same as you, right? They may have born
Yep.
in different circumstances. You're capable as them. You're in the same program as them. So you know that at least somebody saw something in you as well, the same way they saw in them. So you're gonna walk in there the same way they're confident. You're gonna believe that you belong. And sometimes I have to trick my mind. I'll smart,
Yeah.
like tell myself that narrative when I wake up. I belong here. I was born to do this. This is my calling. I have to reaffirm myself every single day because it is about changing the narrative, the false narrative that society has put on you. So I'm always doing the work constantly to stop the subliminal messages that are coming from me to me from everywhere, like, oh, you can't do that because you're a Black woman. Well,
I love it.
no, I can't. I am, like, race is just a social construct. I have the same brain. I keep telling myself I will do it. It may be harder, but I will get to where I'm trying to get to. And do you have any other tips on how we can change the narrative that society
Yeah.
has
Well,
told
I
us?
love that. I love all of that. And, I have leaders ask me a lot, like, what can we do to help when people are struggling with this? And I think there are two answers to that. I tell a lot of stories in the book, and there's one person I feature named Jamil, who is just this absolute, like, super accomplished badass. He was an immigrant from Africa. He was adopted by a like wealthy white family. He just had all of these things that happened in his life that made him feel othered. And of course, ended up having a lot of this imposter phenomenon show up for him, and then went to like the best schools and the best hospitals. He's just the most impressive and amazing, kind, lovely human on the planet. And you were saying earlier, Julia, how, and the research does support this, that you would think that the more we accomplish, we would outrun these thoughts and feelings. Like, one of these days, I can look at my resume and feel legitimate, when actually the opposite happens, that the higher we climb, the more we're expected to know. So we don't really outrun these imposter thoughts and feelings. But that wasn't the case for Jamil. And I was like, so what was different for you? And he said he was really fortunate to have been in many rooms, classrooms and work spaces, where his mentors and leaders were constantly saying, if you're here, you belong here. If you're here, there's a reason, right? You're only at Stanford because you're amazing. And for him, he let himself take that in. Instead of going, oh, they're just being nice. Oh, they're just saying that. Oh, I'm just here because of my legacy. My dad got me in. Whatever the things are we say to ourselves, is like to take that in. And so, Julia, you're saying those things to yourself. But what leaders can do that's even more powerful is they can say those things to us. And then we have to be open and let it come in. You know how like someone gives you a compliment and you like bat it away, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, thank you, I'm going to
Thank
take it in,
you. Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing leaders can do, and we can do if we are also leaders, is to admit that we struggle with this too. That this is normal, that so many of us have these thoughts and feelings. But like, if I'm a leader, if I'm in a position of power in an organization, that means that I pushed through and kept going, even in the presence of these thoughts and feelings. So it's okay. You feel this way. You don't have to fix it. Just keep going. Like, just keep showing up as your awesome, badass self, even when those thoughts and feelings get loud.
Yeah, it's so easy though to believe the lies, like,
I know.
or negative more than positive. Because even I'll share a personal story. Me growing up, a lot of people would be like, because I was very, very, very skinny, and I would be like, I was. I don't know. I believe I was beautiful, and I see pictures of myself, and I was like, you were so stunning. But because of the bullying and people constantly telling me you're not beautiful, I just, as a teen, I was like, yeah, I'm not beautiful. I can't let myself go. And then in my awakening of, oh, wait a minute, these suckers were lying to me.
Yeah.
And I started to think to myself, no, you are beautiful. I started to change the narrative. Even though I had my mom say you're beautiful, you think she's my mom, she's just saying that. But that's why you need to get your validation, and I am enough. I have
Yes.
something to offer. I like those are the things I tell myself before I walk out of the door, before I go to any meeting, before I come on here. It's my
Mhm.
prayer, it's my affirmation, it's my telling myself, you don't have to be anything more than you are at the moment. At this
Mhm.
moment, you have everything you need to
Yeah.
succeed. And then when you start to do that, you start to become a good steward of what you have. So instead of neglecting your own say in the office meeting, when you do have something important to contribute, you will steward it well and know that even though your voice is shaking, you do have to present that because it
Right.
matters, And sometimes we do get the douche bosses who are really, really jerks. We do get people who are really jerks and who want to put us down. But you have to, if the imposter, if your Sheila is right here, you have to have another voice right here, just like
Yeah.
combating that and saying, no, you belong here.
Yeah.
You
Well,
belong
and
here.
I like to always put in a plug for community because I think
Yes.
if we can do that, great. But sometimes it's hard to believe. It takes a lot of work to believe, yes, I'm beautiful. Yes, I have something to say. If I'm starting from a place of significant insecurity and imposter
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and feelings, and that's okay. Still say it and show up even if you don't believe it. But I think like when we really struggle to kind of get out of our own way, we can also rely on community. So I agree with you. Better for it to be internal and come from ourselves. When
Mm-hmm.
that feels really hard or even impossible, rely on your trusted community. And it may not be your douche boss. It might be your best friend or your mom or a colleague, someone who knows you and sees you, someone who you trust. I
Mm-hmm.
tell this story in the book about how I had run for this like board position and I didn't get it and I wasn't going to run the next year because I just felt like a failure. Like I'm not going to put myself out there just to fail again. And I was part of this women's group and all of those women were like, "No, Jill, you have to. Like you're great.
Mm-hmm.
We need you. We need your voice. Go for it." And even though I couldn't internalize what they were saying, I trusted that maybe they knew something I didn't. I trusted that they
Absolutely.
wouldn't say this to me if they didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I felt really scared, I did it anyway. And that time, I did get that position. And it really, really helped to have those women in my corner. And so I think that's another way to kind of outsmart. I love that you use that word. I've never used that word before and I love it. Like you can outsmart some of this stuff
Yeah.
by relying on your community because they might be a little bit smarter about your amazingness if you're someone who has had, family or social culture experiences that have made you question your worth.
Yeah. I advocate, listen, when I was in my earlier 20s, I was having friends for friends' sake. I was having friends who can go to the brunches with me, who can come with me to the parties. Now, I'm so much wiser in selecting my community because these
Mhm.
are the people who are going to be there when you need. I feel I'm not enough. And they're like, you are enough. They
Yeah.
remind you of who you are sometimes when you forget. You can get off the phone call like, I am. Yes, I am that
Yes.
girl. Like, thank you
Yeah.
so much. And then you hang up the call and then go. So, yes, absolutely. Sometimes when you're not enough, you also do need to select the right people and the right
Yeah.
community. So I love that you mentioned that. We're coming to the end of our conversation, but there's something I really wanted to touch on before we go. You
Sure.
spoke about emotional avoidance and how that
Mm.
is linked to emotional pain in your book. Can you please expand on that? Because I believe this is so
Yes.
important.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about this. So, when I talk about avoidance, it's really anything that you do, it's experiential avoidance or emotional avoidance, like you said. So, it's anything that you do or don't do in an effort to try to control how you're feeling on the inside. And typically that's like, to escape a feeling that we don't want or avoid a feeling we don't want. Or sometimes it's to grab onto a feeling we would like to have more of. Now, avoidance isn't always problematic. So, for example, let's say I had a bad headache before our interview today. And so I decide to take a couple Tylenol and that gets rid of my headache. Well, by the definition I just gave you, I did something that changed the way I felt on the inside. That's avoidance. Is that bad? Well, if I'm only taking a couple Tylenol every once in a while and it's not hurting my liver and I can afford to buy the bottle and it's allowing me to show up and be more present and articulate because I'm not in pain, then it's not a problem. But if I'm like so unwilling to feel any kind of pain, and, as a middle-aged lady, something always hurts, that I'm taking like, 4 Tylenol every 2 hours and now I have liver damage and I'm getting rebound headaches because of it. Well, now it has a cost. Or the other example I like is if you're in the rain and you're cold and wet, if you put up an umbrella, that's avoidance. It changes how you feel. You're going to be drier and warmer. Okay, so that's avoidance. Is it bad? Well, if you're just walking down the street in your neighborhood, probably not. But if you're at a Red Sox game, for example, I live in the Boston area, and it starts to rain at the game and you put up your big giant umbrella and now the water's dripping off the sides onto your neighbors next to you and you're blocking the view behind you, and your values are such that you care about being a courteous citizen and neighbor, now it has a cost. So what I encourage my clients to do is notice when pain, emotional pain, discomfort shows up. What do you do or not do? And what does that get you? Because it works or we wouldn't do it. Like, we all know procrastination is bad, but we do it anyway. Why? Because the minute we give ourselves permission to put something off that we don't want to do, we get relief. So recognize this thing I'm doing is making me feel better in some way. That's avoidance. Okay. Does it have a cost? If the answer is no, no harm, no foul. Go be your bad self and put your umbrella up in the rain. But if it has a cost, and especially if that cost is at the expense of your values, then the alternative is to practice getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Can I be willing to be cold and wet because I really want to see the end of the game because I know the Red Sox are going to kill the Yankees, and I don't want to be a bad neighbor to everyone sitting with me in the stadium? I'm going to let myself tolerate being cold and wet and not use my umbrella because that's what's consistent with my values. Now, it's not like no pain, no gain. It's not be cold and wet for the sake of being cold and wet, right? If there's nobody sitting around you and you're all by yourself at Fenway, then go ahead and put your umbrella up.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I think is really important to point out here is when we choose avoidance, like let's go back to the example you gave where you were speaking at the United Nations and your voice is shaking and everything else. You were very uncomfortable. You were very anxious, right? You easily could have avoided all that anxiety. And all you had to do was call in sick and not go do the thing. And you would have had immediate relief, right? And that's what we often do. We avoid to feel better. But what we don't think about is how would you have felt about the fact that you didn't go do the thing?
Yeah.
Terrible. So you're
Yeah.
actually just trading one pain for another. Right?
Mm.
When you don't live your values, you still end up with discomfort because you feel bad about the fact that you're not living the life you want to live or showing up as the person you want to show up as. And so if you have to, I always tell my clients, the bad news is no matter what, you're going to feel uncomfortable. But the good news is this can sort of be liberating because that means your discomfort doesn't have to be in charge of what you do. If you're going to feel bad either way, then you might as well choose the life you want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much. That is true. One thing I had to do is definitely identify those values. Like what is your goal in the long run? And they say this for like exercise and stuff. I'm not there yet, but it's like identify what is your goal and how much do you want that? Because that is important. So what is your values? Keep that in mind. I'm going to keep that in mind.
And with the you just said about exercise, like the exercise example, I struggled with this for so long because I kept thinking, okay, my values, health, longevity, and it wasn't clicking. And then one day I realized I have a husband who like looks really good, but doesn't have to work at it. And I had this aha moment where I was like, my kids can't grow up with 2 sedentary parents. Like they need to have one parent who models moving your body. And that was it. The day I made that connection to my value of like what it means to be a good mom, then I started exercising regularly. So, and there are lots of ways to identify your values. Like I don't want listeners to think you should be able to be like, what are your values? Okay, that's clear. And, there's lots of those exercises in the book that you can help you come up with some of those values to get more clear on that.
The book is very practical. I would encourage anybody to get it on, I believe Amazon was where I saw it, or a bookstore near you should
It's
have it. But
everywhere. Yep.
yeah, the book is amazing. It's very practical. It has some insights after each chapter to help you understand and practice what you just learned. So that's good. So our next question is from a viewer. We like to do a ask
Oh,
an expert question. So
love it.
what people want to know, what the streets want to know about imposter syndrome. And I really like this question. This person asked, how can I tell the difference between healthy self-reflection and harmful self-doubt?
Ooh. Well, I mean, the very first thing that pops in my head is values. Like to me, it's never about how you feel, it's about what you're doing or not doing.
Mm,
And, so if like if whatever the thoughts and feelings are you're having are stopping you from doing what you want to do, then to me that means like it's never about your thoughts or feelings being healthy or unhealthy, because we don't control our thoughts and feelings. They just happen. Like thoughts and feelings get triggered for all sorts of different reasons. We don't choose them, but we get to choose how to respond to them. And no matter what those thoughts are, you can respond in a way that's values driven. And I'll give you a quick example. If I had the thought, because not all critical thoughts are bad, and this is, I want to get to the healthy self-reflection piece. If I have the thought, gee, Jill, you really weren't very present with your kids last night. They kept trying to get your attention, but you were scrolling on your phone. That wasn't really a very good mom move. Now, that's me being self-critical, but it's also telling me that I wasn't showing up and acting in accordance with my values. And so I
mm,
actually want to listen to that thought and then tonight be more attentive and present, because those are my values. And I want to show up, and be a good mom to my kids and not be scrolling on my phone. But if my mind was saying, you're such an awful mother, you should just abandon your family because they'd be better off without you. That's not, the first one was healthy self-reflection. The second
mm.
one, if abandoning my family is not values consistent. And so I think that's kind of, does that make sense? Do you think that answers the
Absolutely.
question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about how it's presented and not necessarily like it's about what it's saying, but also how it's presented. So one is really negative and it's not helpful, but the other one's almost like self-reflection when you're reflecting on yourself. Oh, I should have been kinder to this person and better to this person rather than, oh, I just hate myself, because those
Yeah.
are very two different things. So
Well, and you know
yeah.
what I would add to that too is like you can ask yourself, if I listen to this thought, is it going to move me in the direction of the life I want to live and the person I want to be? And
Mm-hmm.
if not, then this is a thought that's not helpful. Now, healthy self-reflection might be, you know what? I just got out of college. I really have a lot of I need to like get my feet wet and prove myself. I shouldn't expect to go be the CEO when I'm
Mm-hmm.
22. Like that's healthy self-reflection. Like I don't really have the knowledge or expertise to do this job yet, right? So like that's what you might want to listen to. And then the action would be, what do I need to do to get myself there? Because I'd like to do that someday.
Mm-hmm.
But then where it might cross into imposter syndrome is like we know that women will only apply for a job if they meet 100% of the criteria
Yeah.
for the thing, whereas men will apply if they only meet 60%. So just be more
Yeah.
like that. It's like you
Yeah.
don't wait until you don't have to know everything in order to move forward. You just have to know enough to like get in there and be semi-competent and then learn while you're going, and that's okay. But it's a great question because it's not a super obvious, black and white
Answer.
line. Yeah.
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 Well, thank you so much for coming. This has been such an incredible discussion. And we're down to our last question. How would the world be a better place if people learn to silence their imposterization? Is that the word? Voice.
I've never heard it, but I like it.
The voice of the imposter. How would the world be a better place? With
Well,
that.
that's a hard question to answer because it's like, how would the world be better if we lived on the moon? Like it just feels like it's impossible. So I don't think we need to silence our imposter voice. I think the world would be better if we were willing to show up as our like biggest, baddest, most amazing selves, even when that voice gets loud. And then I think, especially people who have been marginalized and have stayed small, can really like shine and change the world if they don't
Yeah.
hold themselves back because of that voice.
Okay. And that is the episode. And I thank you all for listening and coming to the end of this conversation. But I also want to thank Jill Stoddard so much for this excellent conversation. I definitely learned a lot. I hope everybody did too. And please go get her book, Imposter No More. It's actually really, really amazing. I'm very into books that are practical, that will help me and guide me as I read it. So it's not like an ordinary self-help book. It's very grounded and rooted in real life stories and scenarios. So thank you so much for writing the book, and thank you so much for joining this conversation. And I'll see the rest of you in the next episode. Thank
you,
you.
Julia. This was great. Appreciate you having me.
You're welcome. And